Kind of like the same story. It says, way back in the hills in the midst of Roane County.
There you go.
That's where I've roamed for so many long years. That's where my heart's been most tenderly forever. That's where the first steps of misfortune I made. I was about 30 years when I courted and married. A maid of Gilbert's was then called my wife. Her brother stabbed me for some unknown reason. And 6 weeks later I had taken his life. I was captured and tried in the village of Spencer. Not a man in that county would speak one kind word. The jury came in with a verdict next morning. A lifetime in prison was the words that I heard. No matter what happens to me in Roane County, no matter how long the sentence may be, they'll measure my grave on the banks of Old Cumberland just as soon as I finish the rest of my days.
About to. Right.
Another one was, pretty fair maid was out in the garden. A gay young soldier came marching by, saying, pretty fair maid, do you fancy a soldier who has come so far to marry thee? No, kind sir, I've a lover over the ocean. For 7 years he has been gone, and if he stays there 7 years longer, no man on earth can marry me. He drew his hands all out of his pockets. His fingers, they were both short and small, saying, pretty fair maid, do you fancy a soldier? And at his feet the maid his ball falls. I think I said something about the ring, didn't I?
Not yet.
Okay, then I went wrong. He drew his hands all out of his pockets. His fingers, they were both short and small, saying, pretty fair maid, here's the ring you gave me. And at his feet the maid did fall. That's the way it.
Right.
I can't think of another one right off the top of my head. I probably could if I tried. The roving gambler, I'm pretty sure is on that tape. I am the roving gambler, I've gambled my life away. Wherever I see a deck of cards, I lay my money down. I lay my money down. I started out in Charleston to Maryville. I'd go through all South Carolina, this wide world to explore. Wealth and money was plentiful, the girls all treated me kind, but the girl I left behind me was always on my mind. She took me in her parlor, she cooled me with her fan. She whispered low to her mother dear, I love this gambling man, I love this gambling man. There's a version of the roving gambler out now, but it's different from that. It don't have the same wording. It's similar, but somebody's done like me that couldn't remember it all.
Right. So You should tell me the witch stories, because I like the witch
which
stories.
one do you want me to tell you?
Well, Tell who she is and stuff. And
Yeah.
then go on.
Tell me who she is. And
Tell me what?
tell me who she is and where this
Okay.
happened.
The woman that was reputed to be a witch in Mitchell County at that time her name was Becky Lincolnfeld. And it was pretty much accepted fact by everybody that she was a witch. For instance, when she died, it was in the middle of July. And it snowed just as hard as it could snow for about 30 minutes when she died. But some of the things that's accredited to her was this one, I've forgotten his name, the guy that wanted to be taught how to be a witch. So he went to her and she told him, yeah, she would teach him to be a witch if he would bring her a new pair of shoes and a sack of flour and meet her at midnight up behind the Beans Creek Church at the cemetery. Well, he got the sack of flour and a new pair of shoes, and he went to the Beans Creek Church Cemetery at midnight. When he got there, the first thing she did, she changed into a black cat and went running out of a tree that was laying over into another tree. Scared him finally to death. He ran off of the hill, left his sack of flour, left his shoes, ran through the briar patch and tore himself up considerably, but he didn't learn how to be a witch. She was also seen to do by reputable people, at least. Everybody said they were. She was sitting on her front porch peeling potatoes. And she was like the old ladies back in those days did. She had on an apron. She was peeling the potatoes into her apron. And when she got done peeling the potatoes, she stood up, took her apron in her hand, slung the potato peelings out into the front yard and hollered, shoo, 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 and little chickens ran everywhere. She's also, another story concerning her was the one where she lived in the old house that my granddaddy owned on Beans Creek. And right across from her in what they call the Zeke Holler lived Zeke Garland. And he had this problem that every morning when he got up, he was tired to death and he couldn't find out what was happening. Go to the doctor and they couldn't find any reason for it. So he decided he'd go to Simon Harrell, who was a witch doctor, or as we would sometimes call him, a warlock. And Simon said, yeah, you are being used. Says, what's happening? She's turning you into a horse at night and riding you like a horse. Well, he says, what do you want me to do? He says, I can stop it. He says, do you want to kill her? He said, no, I just want to know for sure it's her. He said, well, all right. He drew a picture of a woman on a piece of paper, gave him a silver ball for his hog rifle, said, now wherever you want this woman affected, you shoot this silver ball through that. Well, he took it home, put it out on the post, shot that picture in the hip, and at the crack of that rifle, Becky Lincolnfeld fell off of her front porch and broke her hip.
What about the one where her mouth got turned inside
Huh?
out? What about the one where her mouth got turned inside out?
Well, that was a different one. That was a different person. Her name was I've forgotten. She was a Yelton, but I can't think of her first name. But she was related. She was related to my brother Ed's wife. It was her aunt, and she got mad at Glenn Garland because for some reason that I don't even remember in the story. But anyhow, she turned she would put a spell on the cows until all they were getting was bloody milk. Today, veterinarians would say that was mastitis, but in that day they didn't believe it was mastitis. But at any rate, Glenn went to Simon Harrell again and said, who was it? It was this Shelton lady, or woman, which you call her lady if you want to, but anyhow, he said, well, can you do anything about it? He said, yeah, I can. So he said, now, this is going to cause her to not be able to to eat or drink anything. Her mouth will just get sore and sore and sore. It says she'll come and want you to give her something or loan her something. But it says whatever you do, until you get ready for this spell to be broken, don't let her have a thing. Well, her mouth got sore and sore and sore, and she came and wanted this and wanted that. And Glenn was not there that day. Of course, Glenn probably would have let her went forever and never let her out from under the spell. But his wife was, like most women, she was sympathetic to another woman particularly, and her name was Roxy Yelton, is what it was. And Miss Yelton came down and wanted an old shoe that was laying in the front yard. And Nora Garland, that was Glenn's wife, gave her that old shoe, and that ended the spell. Now, to give you some more of the old ghost stories, my dad, Taylor Whitson, was coming back from Pigeon Roost, which it was in the middle of the night, walking. He had been over there, this was before he was married, carousing around. And this is walking through the mountains now, western North Carolina, and it's a distance of probably, by the way that you would walk, of at least 10 miles, or the way you would walk to come from Pigeon Roost back to Beans Creek where he lived. Well, he came back down and he was on his way back home, and he crossed this footlock across the creek. Well, now, just before you got to the footlock, his aunt lived in a house on the other end, just 20, 30 feet from the footlock. I can still remember the house. But at any rate, just as he stepped off of that footlock, something walked out in front of him, just about, he said, the size of a yearling heifer or something, just as black as it could be, eyes about the size of a saucer, and just as red as they could be. Well, he had a gun in his hip pocket, but he wasn't scared. He was pretty rough character at that time. He didn't want to shoot it, so he said, "Oh, I'll just kick its guts out." And he pulled back and kicked, and when he kicked, he hit nothing but thin air, and said it jumped sideways about 20 feet sideways, and said it went down the road in front of him. Every time it hit the ground, it sounded like a barrel of water was sloshing. He said he still wasn't scared then, but when he got down to where he saw it go out of sight on the curve in the road, he began to get scared. And before very farther down the road, his hat, he wore a hat at that time, a felt hat, always did. And he said his hair would push that hat up off of his head. He'd reach up, pull it down, his hair would push it back up. Well, he went on a little farther down the road to where his brother lived, and he went in and spent the night because he was that scared. Another one of the ghost stories. My dad, my mother, and at that time my brother Ed was a baby, were spending the night at my granddaddy Whitson's, which was Sam Whitson's old home place, and they were upstairs in the bedroom. The bedroom they were in had a rocking chair sitting out in the middle of the floor with a pack of quilts on it, like old timers used to do in case you got cold. You got extra cover and put on the bed. My mother woke up somewhere in the middle of the night to let the baby, which was Ed, nurse. And she said right in front of her face, it sounded like they were within 3 feet of her, something called her name 3 times. Mary, Mary, Mary. But there wasn't anything there. Well, she woke my dad up and told him what had happened. And his answer was, don't worry about it, he's going back to sleep. Well, he did. They did. Then he was woke up. They were asleep in a bed that had what used to be, in place of a mattress, a straw tick, a big thing about the size of a mattress filled with straw is what it was. And he woke up with something shoving his head right down between the headboard and the straw tick. Well, his arms was under the cover because it was in the wintertime. His arms were under the cover. And he said it was just like something was sitting on top of him, holding him down, pushing his head down between that straw tick and the headboard. Well, he finally struggled and got his arm out from under the straw tick, under the cover, reached up to get whatever it was, there was nothing there. About that time, the rocking chair, which was sitting out in the floor, if the floor was rough boards like the older houses had in them upstairs, the rocking chair went to rocking back and forth across that rough floor. You could hear it rocking back and forth, back and forth. They still went back to sleep, spent the rest of the night in that room. Another one of the stories that he told, this is my dad now, his brother lived in the old house where the witch that we talked about, Becky Lincolnfeld, lived at one time. But at that time, my dad's brother, Carr, and his wife, Lola, lived in that house. My dad, he was coming back from somewhere he'd been in the middle of the night, who knows, going home. And he said he heard somebody over in the chimney corner crying their eyes out. Well, Carr and Lowell wasn't the most compatible in the world, and they had a lot of fights. And he thought they'd just been in another fight. So he said he stood at the road, had a plank fence around the yard on the house, and listened to her cry for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And he debated whether or not to go in, and he decided, well, I better not get involved in a family squabble. So he said he just turned around, went on up the road, and went home. Carl and Lowell wasn't home. There was nobody there that night. They were on pigeon roost, spending the night. Another time he was coming up through that same road, from that same house. The Whitson Cemetery is up on the hill to the left of that old house. And he said he saw this ball of fire start up at the cemetery, roll down the hill, it's probably 1,000 yards away. It rolled down the hill to that house, hesitated a little bit there at the house, and turned around and rolled back up the hill to that cemetery. About 3 days later, Carl and Lowell's daughter, they were still living in that house, Carl and Lowell's daughter died and was buried in that cemetery.
See if you remember any of the other ones.
Another one was my brother-in-law, Frank Garland's. His daddy's name was Nath Garland. And this, too, was reputed to be a pretty rough character. Carried his couple of guns all the time, a couple of pistols with him everywhere he went. Drank a lot, caroused a lot, but he was coming back home one night. Right below his house is the forks of the road where the Bad Creek Baptist Church now stands, but at that time there was nothing there. But as he came back up the road, down off of this hill came this thing with about 3 heads, red of his eyes were as red as they could be, and said it just spit fire all over him. Well, he pulled out his pistol and shot him again, shot it. Well, it really spit the fire all over him then, and he promptly went on home and went to bed. This is the same man that they said after he died, when he was alive, he'd always come up to the house, ride his horse up, tie it to the post on the porch, pull its saddle off, bridle off, and they carried what they called a slicker, which is a raincoat at that time. He'd hang his slicker up on the porch, hang his saddle on the porch, then take the horse on over and put it in the barn. Well, after he died, in the middle of the night, they could still hear something ride up to the porch, walk across the porch as if it were hanging up the saddle and the slicker, then walk back off of the porch to take the horse to the barn. This is the same gentleman that was supposed to be riding his horse up the road, and something jumped up behind him on the horse. Well, he turned around to look, and lo and behold, it appeared to be a man with no head. He rode his horse on up till he came to the creek, and whatever it was, hopped off. Didn't ride any farther with him. So some of the old timers always said a ghost wouldn't follow you across water. So I don't know, that may be their superstition, but that's what they thought anyway.
Hmm.